Welcome everybody to Raising Multilinguals Live. My name is Tetsu Young from Ask Tetsu. Colleagues.
And I am Rita Rosenbach from multilingualparenting.com. Welcome.
Hello, and my name is Ute Limacher-Riebold from Ute's International Lounge. And today we have Mila Schwartz as our guest. Hi, Mila. Welcome.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. Nice to see you. Mila Schwartz is professor in language and education and head of research authority in Oranim Academic College of Education in Israel. Her research interests include studying language policy and models of early bilingual education, linguistic, cognitive, and sociocultural development of early sequential bilinguals or multilinguals, family language policy and bilingual teachers' language conducive strategies and pedagogical development. In her research, she focuses on two unique populations: second-generation Russian Hebrew-speaking immigrants from the former Soviet Union, and Arabic and Hebrew-speaking children enrolled in bilingual binational education in Israel. So, very welcome, Mila. We are very much looking forward to talking with you about the topic of this evening. I would like to start with a question because many parents have a so-called top-down approach, so parents towards children approach when it comes to determining the language that are spoken in the family. And parents are the first ones who decide what language is important for their children and very often prefer maybe the more prestigious ones. Maybe we can touch this also. Mila, you have done extensive research on child agency in the context of language maintenance. Could you please explain a little bit to our audience what is meant with child agency, agentic behavior, etc.?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. And I'm indeed thrilled to talk to parents and to participate in this event. Usually we address children, we used to address children as objects of our language policy. And recently, research approach toward a role of children in language learning and language development started to focus on children as not as a passive objects who are shaped and guided by significant others, by parents, by caregivers, by teachers, but who are fully fledged members of our society, of the family, someone who should be viewed as an active agent in the language learning and in the shaping of the family language policy. Family language policy, under this term, I mean parental attitudes and beliefs and family members' attitudes and beliefs towards language maintenance, language acquisition, and intergenerational language transmission. Also parental and the other family language members, including children, language use, daily language use, patterns of this use, and also language management. I will address this notion of the family language policy later, a bit more, maybe in more extensive way. So in general, we can define agency as an active social engagement. For example, you are, all three of you are agents who are engaged in promotion of multilingual child bearing, child rearing, and a multilingual approach towards family language policy. You are active agents in this sense. So we can address children, we need to address children's voice. We need to listen to our children's voice, to hear them, and to understand that they are active in the process of language development. They have their inner motivation, inspiration, drive. And in many cases, they have not this drive and this inspiration. So what I mean, I tried briefly to describe it under the notion of agency, and I will be glad also to expand on how we view as researchers what we did find, what does it mean, child's language-based agency specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we would like to know a little bit more about what this agency consists in, right? When you say, well, okay, that we involve the children, I think now of newborn children, we cannot involve them, we cannot ask them, right? I mean, there are studies that can show that the children can recognize the voices of the parents, or recognize the languages of the parents. But may I ask, when would this agency or the active involvement of the children start? From what age, or how can we recognize the moment when this starts?
And how is it expressed in daily life? So
Yes.
I will describe some features that we observed as researchers. So what I'm going to talk about is not only my personal observations, but all this data are research-based. And because my focus is on children at age 3, 4, from 3 to 5, 6, maybe agency starts early. As far as I know from research, children at age 2.5, the earliest signs of agency that I found in literature, in research literature, children can express it at age around 2. It's also closely related to language development and stages in language development. So in order to express language agency, language-based agency, child needs to progress in language acquisition. But this agency can be expressed also by non-verbal signs, non-verbal behavior. So let's start from describing agency, child language-based agency, and then I will also address a question of non-verbal behavior as a sign of the child's language-based agency. So children as young as 3 years old can describe their languages as funny, as boring. So they can provide adjectives describing their languages, and I view this description as an expression of agency, of attitudes and beliefs, child's early attitudes and beliefs toward languages around him or her. This expression can be related to the home language or the other languages in child's wider environment. We can observe child language-based agency in their, in his or her enthusiasm about language use and about language learning that is not limited to his or her heritage language. So some children show enthusiasm about languages in general, and at age 3, 4, 5, then start to ask questions about languages in their environment. They ask for translations, they ask for explanation, for negotiation of meanings. Their parents, teachers, their peers, caregivers, they can ask how it will be in the target language. They can also compare languages in some way and say that it is not correct. Also discuss language accuracy in language use, and also provide cases of self-correction or comments concerning language use of their of other significant others in their environment. As they show proactive behavior, and it can be, I think, I speculate that this proactive behavior facilitates their language learning skills acquisition. I observe this proactive behavior mostly in the classroom context and received a lot of evidence from parents in terms of family context. And this proactive behavior seems we have still few research data, and we need to expand our research, but it seems that this proactive behavior is closely connected to their progress in the target language.
Sorry to interrupt here. By proactive behavior, you mean from the children? The children,
Well,
they
it
have
comes
this...
from children. It all comes from children. It's a child driven and child-based. That is why I stress child-based agency. So this agency is related to child's character and temperament. We'll talk about it, personal characteristics, aptitude, language aptitude. What is important to stress that we observe, I run observations. I don't run measures. I don't measure this behavior quantitatively, but also quantitatively because I can measure frequency of these behaviors.
Yeah.
I observe these behaviors in the preschool context, preschool classroom, and also receive evidence from parents because I interview my parents.
If I can ask a question as well, it's highly interesting because I've always thought that a child-centered approach is vital. And like Ute and I, we both help families to set up their language plans. And one thing I tell parents is that I will always be on your child's side. That might sometimes mean that I'm not on your side when you think that this should be done like this or like that. So even with the baby, I think I just love what you're saying, because that's exactly what I have always thought, that it's so important to take into account what the child's future needs may be, not what parents' current needs are. But what I wanted to so in your research, so you are studying the proactive communication.
Not only proactive. I will continue.
You also ask questions. You also ask questions from children. Then
we interview children. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And then I presume you then also interview parents, because what the children express will mostly, except for some, I don't know about aptitude and that, but the kind of the interest and the questioning, the fascination in the languages, it's probably a reflection of the parents' attitudes as well.
Yes, definitely, because I support, I promote as a researcher ecological approach. So in my research, I interview parents, teachers, children, and try to triangulate these sources of data in order to come to some conclusion.
Oh, I love what you just said. Ecological approach. I
ecological
really,
approach, because child is ecological
the whole
subject and object. Yes, we are all part of ecology. We can't. It's my attitude as a researcher. We can't address only parental and focus only on parents' views. We need to look at another side. And hopefully this side will be matched, related to the parental views, but maybe not. So educational side and educational attitudes, beliefs and knowledge are very important in order to combine a puzzle of child's multilingual development, including child himself or herself in the center, if we are talking about child-centered approach. that is actually Western, is very popular in Finland, in the Scandinavian context, and not only in Scandinavian context, in the European context. It was not so popular in the former Soviet Union and maybe in China. Maybe things are changeable now, but it's actually child-centered approach in family language policy as well. So on the other side of this coin, we can observe another type of behavior that can be expressed in a clear-cut and persistent longitudinal unwillingness to use some language, specific language, a rejection of some language. And it can be a child can be very stubborn and very persistent in this refusal. So we have many cases coming from parental observations and painful experience of parents. It can be related, unfortunately, to the heritage language or the home language that parents would like to transmit.
Yes. May I ask something about this language refusal, or yes, this kind of attitude from children from a very young age, as I understand. They are related, like you said, with the parental attitude and the attitude from the context, the broader context, not only the family, but also the community, the people around you, the extended family, etc. And I can imagine that these refusals of the home language or home languages might depend also on the language ideology, so the attitude that the parents have towards these languages. How far does this go, or what could parents possibly do, parents, then teachers, community, everyone else involved in the multilingual upbringing of a child, to make sure somehow, or to support the languages that might be subjected to refusal from the child?
So it's indeed a very important question, and thank you for asking me. Briefly, definitely we can suggest parents to look at some literature in the future, relevant literature, but briefly, I would like to address one very important approach that was also checked, run within one family of the immigrant family by Dr. Shulamit Kapiliovich. This approach, as a part of the family language policy, is entitled happylingual approach. And it means flexible family language policy and multi-dimensional family language policy that reflects a positive emotional coloring of the complex processes related to the heritage language transmission. And actually this approach stresses that at home, all languages around child are important and are respectable by parents. So it means that parents transmit, actually aimed to transmit their heritage language, Finnish, Mandarin, Dutch, Italian, Russian, etc. But it does not mean that the other languages that are around child, societal languages, main languages, official languages of the country, of the host country, foreign languages like German, English, French, whatever, are not important. So it means that parents have realistic expectations concerning heritage language maintenance and transmission. They realize that they can't build walls and detach child from the external ecological environment, wider context, external context out of the house. And they transmit and develop feeling of importance of all languages around child. And from the one side, from the other side, they stress the symbolic, emotional importance of the heritage language and its transmission. So it means that actually child is brought in the atmosphere of happylingual attitudes and happylingual approach towards languages. So it's like on the theoretical level, and we can also discuss this approach on the practical level as well.
Yes, yes, I would like to know more about this. I like the word of happy lingual approach. You saw us all just smile. Can you tell us more about this? So how does it look like, or how does it look like in practice, this kind of approach? I think we all have something in mind, but I would like to have it confirmed.
So it means that actually we can't go by strict demands, demand from child strictly to stick to one language. This demanding approach can bring to negative reaction, negative attitudes, and can also raise such kind of emotions as withdrawing, embarrassment, rejection, even heritage language rejection. We don't want to come to the situations when child will say, I don't want to speak this, and listen to, because his or her ears will build walls around him and will reject language. It's very painful, stressful for parents, and parents write about the stress. So we need to come to, we need to be clever parents. And we need to think how in another way, like in more flexible, happylingual way to approach this transmission. So if we are talking about practical suggestions, and these suggestions are also research-based. So they were checked in research by, for example, Shulamit Kapiliovich, and also in my research, that parents can, for example, reading fairy tales. We all know in the heritage language, fairy tales, folk tales, but the language of folk tales may be will be maybe old-fashioned, and children who learn some languages of heritage may feel uncomfortable with this language. So what we can suggest, adding children's own drawings or pictures taken when they listen to the touching story, emotional story. We can also suggest parents to enact stories of fairy tales, to run some kind of dramatization, or to use shadow theater, puppets, relevant objects, masks, acting out crafts in order to facilitate the children access to the heritage language and to the target stories, and to make this process of the listening to the folk stories as fascinating and easy as possible. For example, and this way of approaching language and literacy environment, creating of language and literacy environment at home, actually will raise positive emotions and will fuel child's curiosity and willingness to listen to the heritage language, to be open to this language that sounds like grandparents just and distant relatives abroad, okay?
Yes, I find this approach is, you explain actively making children take the decision of what is important for them and what is interesting for them, practically. And what I find always difficult is this shift from being demanding, because you have to be somehow consistent with the language input and fostering the language at home, and then being flexible, being consistent but flexible. It seems a contradiction in say, but as you now described, what you described was for me like what I have in mind, or what I know from school settings, right? Where the languages are somehow supported in many different ways, in playful ways. I mean, there are so many ways that you can make it appealing for a child to learn the language. And so you would say this would be maybe a suggestion to parents to do the same at home. I mean, they are not teachers. Yeah, they are still parents. They have the parent hat on, but somehow they can use techniques that are used at school to make it more appealing at home. Would this be something that you would subscribe, that you would encourage?
Definitely, definitely. Parents are creative, but they are lack of time, always. So, and they are very busy with breadwinning and etc. But still, they have agenda. If they have agenda to transmit language, they can find out partners. They can organize play groups, playgrounds, community-based to approach communities. If they have not communities speaking Russian or Finnish in some place where few immigrant families, they can organize as few immigrant families and to think about some creative idea how to transmit language. They can also ask practitioners, but then dramatization and the use of puppets always works. It's a way they interact with children. They always interact with children this way. They play with children's dolls, puppets, and etc. So they don't need to buy some specific equipment or to build a stage. They can be created with what they have in hand at home.
Yes, I often speak about, for example, I recommend parents to have monolingual toys, where the toy only speaks a certain language, for example, and a small child will absolutely accept that. And then what I think what you are explaining is something I say, you can't compel a child to learn a language, but you can make the language compelling. And that is what a parent should do. And I always say parents are their children's they are the experts. They know what make children tick and what interests them. So they know actually what will get a positive reaction for the child. Yes, they are busy, and yes, they need help, and that's, I think, where we all come in, where we need to show them ways. Try this, try that, try the other. Maybe this works in your family.
Definitely, because parent always knows his child in the best way. So that is why I'm very attentive when I run interviews with parents. Even sometimes it can be like some developmental, so I can twice interview parents in order to investigate some developmental changes in children's attitudes. For example, I interviewed one dad when his child was at age 4, and his child was entered bilingual Arabic Hebrew speaking preschool, and child actually was very unwilling to use Arabic. Even so, he entered this preschool it was like simultaneous bilingualism. He was 12 months when he was exposed to Arabic first time. He was Hebrew language speaking child. So I observed him for 2 years, like a very, very lack of interest to use the second language. And at home, even so, his father was the Arabic language speaker, is competent in the bilingual, the Arabic language. This child refused to use Arabic at home. But when I observed this child in the 2 years at school, In the bilingual school at age 7, I realized that actually child's agency is developmental process and flexible and changeable as well. So I observed the child speaking Arabic during a break and playing football with his Arabic speaking native peers. He was fluent in Arabic, and I was impressed and thrilled to listen to his interaction in Arabic in the natural atmosphere without asking. So I realized what I would like to stress, that language-based agency is also flexible and developmental process. So it's changeable. And it also depends on maybe child's maturity at some extent, to some extent.
Yeah, this brings me to a question about the character of the child, the personality of the child. I can imagine that this child that you observed has made a development from when you started observing him to the moment where you saw that he was using the language in a more confident and enjoyable way. Do you know if there are differences from how children react to the languages, if there is any kind of issue or problem or whatever there is that makes them maybe react in a way more, if they are more talkative or more introvert or extroverts? Is there a difference in the child's personality or character that can predetermine somehow that there might be an issue at some point or not? I don't know. It's just something that can...
No, in terms of children who were defined in my research as proactive language learners, indeed, we found that these children were characterized by parents and teachers as very sociable children who tend to create variety of contexts with children coming from different languages, social contexts, and also who are characterized by outgoing personality. But I'm very cautious, careful in my conclusions because we have plenty of evidence that children can be more passive in their language use, or actually show just receptive language skills and not producive language skills, not productive language skills. But still, we can't tell that these children don't develop language, don't acquire language. So they can be maybe more shy, or maybe less included in social contacts in the target language, by still progressing this language. So that is why I'm careful in my conclusions in terms of a link, direct or straightforward link between character, personal characteristics, features, and language progress. But what is important to stress, if we are talking about children, the main aim of child is to create a social context, actually. And the language is a tool to create this context. If we're talking about some target language, second language, for example. So if we're talking about bilingual or multilingual or monolingual classrooms, when child should acquire second language, a novel language for him or her, such kind of personality, a sociable, outgoing personality, helps child to create contacts. And I observed children who used language, second language, with huge amount of mistakes. This fact did not bother them. So they were aimed to create and enhance the social context and position themselves socially. That was their target, and they used language and nonverbal gestures and etc. nonverbal tools in order to progress and to go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yes. May I maybe share a question from the followers, the audience? There is Elihim or Michele. He says, apologies.
Yes.
Yes. I missed the beginning of, so not sure if the following has been mentioned. A, why do people always think they are teaching their children when they actually are raising them in more than one language? They would not think this if they were using the same language in a different setting. So why someone would say that they are teaching the children, whereas they are just speaking the language. I imagine, if I get this right, I don't know how you understand this question. And B, why is it seemingly so important that your child becomes 100% fluent in another language? Is this really about the child or more about the parent? This is a good question. Yes, I think it's for the parent, but Mila.
So can you just, the second question of B, I understood, but the
Yes.
first question, can you just clarify, maybe the audience, the author of the question can ask it.
So I think the question about like when a child grows up in a family, the child acquires the language, but parents often say that they're teaching the child a language. So I think the question was why would parents use the word teaching when the child is actually acquiring?
Acquiring, definitely acquiring. Parents don't teach heritage language, they transmit it with their milk, you know. Okay, so from, no, it's also during pregnancy, you know, because our brain develops during pregnancy, and we know that the weight of brain is the highest or largest weight of the child's body during pregnancy. So the transmission starts very early with the songs and exposure to songs. And it's a natural way of acquiring language, in particular if the target child is exposed only to the target home language. At home, it's like monolingual development till he will enter preschool or kindergarten, which is run on another language, societal language.
I think this is an important question or a point as well to make, since especially families where there is more than one, maybe 2, 3, 4 languages, and then I have heard a comment, well, I'm not a teacher, I don't know how to teach the language. So to emphasize that to acquire the spoken, the understanding and the speaking, there is no teaching ability required from the parents for that they can just pass it on. I mean, when we come to literacy, this is slightly different, but speaking and understanding is teaching is not required.
So we have an additional comment here from the same person, Michele, that I think this is actually one of the reasons why parents stress themselves so much, because they think they need to actually teach when they speak to their children. So it's a great point. It's this definition itself may be the stressing factor.
They're not teachers. They need to continue emotionally communicate with child and transmit language emotionally, heritage language through songs, through nicknames, through praising, scolding, and etc., etc. So through their communication, natural communication in the language that they are competent in. It's very important point also as well. For language development, and for emotional attachment, if we are talking about attachment theory, the parents transmit language through their emotional contact with child. And the second part of the same question was B, that why it's important for parents to stick to pure language and to be aimed, to view a target as a pure language. You know, I agree to some extent, as a linguist, I understand that it's important for parents, a purity of language. But I would like to show another side of this coin. Some children, adolescents, it's interesting, adolescents who reminded their history, life history and language history, and were interviewed during research, not my research, and were asked about their previous language experience, childhood experience. They reported about such kind of feelings as embarrassment and fear, even fear, to be mistaken, to pronounce something mistakenly, to be laughed, to be teased by the environment, not by their peers, not by their schoolmates, by their parents, grandparents. So it's also my experience. I also did it, and then I realized that I'm mistaken as a parent. And I listened to the Russian language of my children, and in particular accent, so the Hebrew accent. And I realized that in this way, I actually prevent their willingness to use this language.
Yep.
Yes.
I clothe them. I detach them from their roots. Okay, so we need to take it into account as parents.
Yes, I think this is a very important point, especially if you don't visit those places or the extended family who provide the input in that language very often, like during these times. And I remember when I was a child and we went to Germany to visit our family, and I didn't know the local slang. I didn't know, I didn't understand some jokes, and my extended family was practically asking my parents, but what language are you speaking with your child? And they said, well, we're talking German, but it's a different kind of language, right? But, and they never felt, fortunately, they never felt guilty about that. But I remember that scene still vividly, although I was maybe 5-6 years old. But I think it's a very important point that you make there, that the role of the parents, how they live the language, how they perceive the language, also of the children who are still learning it, maybe in a context that is completely outside of that community where the language is usually spoken, because you speak it only at home. So that's a very important aspect.
Yes, absolutely. And it's sometimes, I've had a case where a boy, 5-year-old boy, he knew his father's language, which happened to be English, so living in Sweden. But he had never, and he understood it 100%, but never spoken it, not said a word. And I spoke to the father and I asked, well, have you discussed this with your child? Have you actually spoken about and asked, why are you not speaking English? I thought, no, kind of that hadn't occurred to him to ask a child. And then he did, and the child said, well, I don't know English as well as you do. I can't speak it as well as you, so I don't. And of course, that was just overwhelming realization for the parent that somehow the child from somewhere has got the impression that he has to be as good as his father before saying anything. And then they had a long discussion, and that kind of opened the floodgates for the boys to dare to say, okay, it's fine to say, and then fine to use wrong words or accent or so on. So that's really, it's so important.
Yes, it brings us to a discussion, brief discussion about corrective feedback that parents give or educators give children. So you can tell that it is not way, it's like spoiled language and etc. And we don't use this language this way, and okay, and just laugh at or tease. And another way is to repeat after child in a correct way, and maybe even to expand utterance, sentence, message, but not, and to ask child to repeat after parent as a model. It's also possible to play paired game. Just again, lovely experience. We can make it as a joke and to laugh together and to play parent game and to repeat after each other. Parent can also learn from child the target language, the dominant language, and child can also correct parent and to play a role of the teacher of the dominant language of the society, host society, and it can be amazing experience for both of them.
Yes. Talking about children, now maybe we all had in mind one child, but what happens with siblings, or what is the role of the siblings? So we have several children in the family, and talking about child agency, like you said, the attitudes can differ quite a lot. Have you come across this in your research, and how is this different maybe for an older child versus a younger child? How can they help each other or maybe hinder the acquisition or the learning in the other child?
What we know from research, not only mine, but also from like summary overview of other research on the family language policy, we know that siblings, elder siblings, bring the societal language, socially dominant language home. And it appears that there are, if they are elder, and we are talking about the younger one, this younger one is exposed to both languages. One can come from the parents and another come from siblings. There are also cases that siblings were responsible for the heritage language transmission in big families, religious families, traditional families. And they were language experts of the heritage language. It also was found and observed. But the most dominant tendency is that during the siblings who are adolescents in particular, used to switch language to the dominant language. It's a general tendency. It does not mean that they don't use their heritage language, and it does not mean that at some situation during their lifelong experience, they will not be competent in using this heritage language.
Yes. Yes, and like you said before, the situation, the attitude towards the languages changes over time. So this can, I think many parents, it's completely flexible and depends on so many factors, not only the family, but also the peers, the community, changing countries, anything. Yes.
Also self-perception, self-efficacy. It's also identity. It's also identity that is actually shaped from early childhood. So we have started this shaping of identity, but identity is a notion or phenomenon. I will define it as phenomenon that is also changeable and develop. We catch it in development. It's endlessly develops identity. So finally it can be resulted at 99 and age 99 as a multiple identities.
Yeah, there was a discussion about multiple identities if you are multilingual, right? But we are not in that kind of thing. I always say we just discover many facets of ourselves, or we discover many more facets thanks to the languages that we have. Yes.
Going back to siblings, what I've seen in my work that parents can generally not influence with languages siblings decide to speak with each other. You may think you can, but when they're out of, so you don't hear them, they will speak whatever they decide to speak, and you can't do anything about it. And that's just something we as parents have to accept. What I have seen work in many cases is when there's, like, for example, a new baby in the family, and the elder siblings are already at school, you can ask for help from the elder sibling and say, we need to make sure that the baby also learns the language, so I need your help. Can you help me to pass it on? And that approach I've seen work in many cases. So
yeah, I would talk from personal experience exactly what Rita just mentioned, but honestly speaking, I wasn't expecting too much this past during the pandemic. My kids were all in Japan, and I teach them Mandarin, so I asked my oldest to teach the younger ones Mandarin. I wasn't expecting too much, but he actually, you know, came through, and he spoke with them in Mandarin, even though they were in Japan, and usually they speak Japanese with each other the whole time. So this is a very good method if you are able to communicate well with your kids. So that's
fantastic.
Yeah.
They like to play a role of teachers, you know.
Yes, and that's exactly
they like to feel responsible.
Exactly.
And
yes.
How do you position themselves? You will give them responsibility to be in charge of their younger brothers, to be an example, a model.
I told them it was very important for daddy and mommy, and we really depended on them. You know, they're playing a very important role for their younger siblings.
Yeah.
And that really, you know, gave them a motivation. So
yes, we know that from my research, we know that it's amazing. It's just a new research domain, language expertise and language experts and language novices, and interaction between language experts and novices in educational context. What I observed, it was amazing that actually peers are very good teachers. And they apply different strategies, diverse strategies. Some of the strategies, it's actually imitation of teachers. But some of the strategies are very creative, and they use diverse tools, verbal, non-verbal, and they expand and they describe and they point, they use artifacts. It's amazing, and huge amount of language input, quality of language and quantity of language comes from peer interaction. What I would like to stress that one of the very important strategies to find out peers who speak the same language, and to create environment like play group or playground group that will permit this natural interaction between peers and the target language.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. I think we can go on for a long time, but I just looked at the clock and I realized we're 5 minutes to the hour, and you know, it was very fascinating. We just don't stop. I do want to, you know, thank all our audience and their great questions, and I do want to acknowledge everybody. We do have a final comment from Michele again. It's a pretty long one, so I think we'll just resume it again down to, we need to, as parents, involve our kids, really take in their perspective and not just say, we teach, you listen. I think it really resumes to that. But we all, you know, lots of us really actually fall into that trap, just as, you know, we're getting the comments, and I myself am guilty of that. So definitely your insights have been really, really helpful today.
Absolutely. Highly interesting.
Highly. We're very, very happy that you could direct everyone now focusing on the child and not standing over the child, so the top down, but the bottom up kind of approach that we should all consider very, very often, if not all the time. I mean, hopefully. Thank you very much, Mila, for being our guest today.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the audience, for the parents, for listening to us this evening or this day as well. And good luck for your inspirations and projects as parents. Never give up.
Never give up. That was a great message, I think, for all of our parents out there. There are times where we just think we cannot get through this, but
yeah,
you just have to take it day by day, right?
Mm-hmm. And
so no, it's personal
to all
experience.
parents, yeah, and to all parents, you're doing a great job.
Indeed, indeed.
Indeed.
Okay, so let's look forward to the next session. If you give me 1 second, I'm going to put up on the screen some information about our next presenter or next interviewee. Okay,
Who will be Dr. Mary Pat O'Malley, who is a speech and language therapist. She's a lecturer at the NUI Galway, which is the National University of Ireland. She's a researcher, author, and has got more than 25 years of experience of working with parents and families with children with speech, language, and communication needs. She's a passionate supporter of bilingual families and their home languages in particular. And this is why she's the perfect person for us to interview on the topic of when a bilingual child seems late to talk. So do join us on the 20th of October for this highly interesting session.
Fantastic. I mean, definitely. It concerns my kids also. So this is a hugely, hugely big topic for everyone. I hope you all look forward to that. Okay, so that's a wrap for today. Again, thanks to all of our audience. I do see a few more comments coming up. We will try to address all your questions and comments after the fact. So do check in again after. Thank you again, Mila. It was a fantastic session. So we will see everybody again at the next session in 2 weeks, October 20th, same time. We say memar, main post, the same time, same channel. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.